Planet Earth is currently insolvent. The United States is carrying a historical burden of over $38 trillion. The European Union is weighed down by $14 trillion. Japan, nearly $9 trillion. Even the oil giants of the Middle East and the manufacturing titans of the East owe colossal, mind-bending sums. But this presents a paradox that should stop us in our tracks. If every single nation on Earth owes money, who exactly is on the collecting end? Do we owe it to Mars? The reality is far stranger. Debt isn't just a financial burden. It is the invisible architecture of our entire civilization. Every war fought, every skyscraper built, and every economic boom celebrated rests upon a vast, trembling scaffolding of IOUs. And if you trace that chain of creditors all the way to the bitter end, you discover an unsettling truth. The world doesn't owe money to an external master, it owes it to itself. To understand how we reached this precipice, a planet drowning in over $315 trillion of total debt, nearly 3 times the size of the global economy, we must look back to a moment of desperation. Centuries before high-frequency trading or digital wire transfers, the concept of national debt was forged not in a bank, but in the heat of battle. In 1694, England wasn't just fighting France, it was fighting bankruptcy. The king, running out of gold, turned to the merchant class with a radical proposition. In exchange for financing the war, the merchants would receive a permanent stream of interest payments, backed by the future labor and taxes of the citizenry. To manage this machinery, the Bank of England was born. It was an act of financial alchemy. The state could now spend money it did not possess. In return, the lenders received a government bond, a tradable promise. This was the seed of the modern financial system. France copied it, the Netherlands refined it, and the United States later adopted it to purchase its expansion across a continent. National debt transformed from a mark of shame into a metric of power. Empires stopped conquering land solely to extract gold. Instead, they issued bonds to extract interest. The battlefield was replaced by the balance sheet. Fast forward 300 years, and debt has become humanity's primary export. Global borrowing now swells by $1 trillion every 100 days. Every nation owes, every bank lends. Every citizen, through the unseen mechanisms of pension funds and taxes, is simultaneously a debtor and a creditor. But who is holding the other end of the rope? Take the United States. Its debt is the anchor of the global economy. Of that staggering $38 trillion, about half is owed to investors. But dispel the myth that foreign powers own America. While it is true that Japan holds $1 trillion and China roughly $800 billion, this foreign debt accounts for only a fraction of the total. The call is coming from inside the house. The majority of American debt is held by American banks, American pension funds, and the Federal Reserve itself. The Treasury issues the bond, the bank buys the bond, the Federal Reserve prints money to buy the bond back. It is a circular mirror. The debt is real, yet the creditor is merely a reflection of the borrower. This circularity is not unique to Washington. It is the operating system of the planet. Japan lends to the US funds the IMF lends to Europe lends to developing nations. Those nations, in turn, park their reserves back in Western bonds. It is a planetary game of hot potato, but the potato is made of promises. Every country holds another's IOU. It is a poker table where every player is betting with chips borrowed from the person sitting next to them. The game only continues because no one dares to stand up and cash out. Yet lurking above this game is a fourth layer, the markets. Behind every bond sits a web of hedge funds, sovereign wealth managers, and central banks controlling tens of trillions in assets. These are the true high priests of the system. They decide which nations can borrow cheaply and which must pay a premium just to survive. When the markets lose faith, currencies vaporize and governments fall. Democracy may choose the leaders, but the markets decide if they survive. At the center of this web sits the central bank. These institutions do not merely manage debt, they manufacture it. When a central bank buys government bonds, it creates new money from thin air. The liability of the government becomes the asset of the bank. In our modern system, every dollar in your pocket represents a unit of debt somewhere else. There is no such thing as debt-free money. Every digital transaction has an invisible IOU stamped on its code. For decades, this loop has been sustained by a single, fragile fuel: confidence. As long as the world believes governments will pay the interest, the machine turns. But we have seen what happens when the belief shatters. In 2010, Greece's debt became mathematically unpayable. Panic ensued. The rescue packages from Europe came wrapped in brutal austerity, tax hikes, slashed pensions, and mass unemployment. Bailout became a synonym for sacrifice. In Sri Lanka, the collapse of credit lines led to fuel shortages and political anarchy. When the system breaks, the invisible creditors suddenly become very visible, holding entire nations by the throat. And yet, inevitably, the machine resets. New loans replace the old, the debt is rolled over. This reveals the open secret of the 21st century. Sovereign debt is not designed to be repaid. It is designed to be refinanced. Governments do not plan to clear their balances. They treat debt like a rolling subscription service where interest is the rent paid for stability. The global economy is a shark that must keep swimming or die. Consider the United States. It will never pay off its $38 trillion. It will refinance it until the end of time. Japan has been rolling over debt for decades, with a debt-to-GDP ratio exceeding 250%, yet its interest rates remain near zero. Why? Because investors aren't looking for repayment, they are looking for safety. A U.S. Treasury bond is considered the safest asset in existence. It is the foundation of global banking. If Washington actually paid off its debt, the world's financial system would lose its primary collateral. The dollar supply would shrink, triggering a catastrophic deflation. The system depends on the debt never vanishing. So governments issue more rhythmically and endlessly. Debt has become the heartbeat of capitalism, pulsing through every mortgage, every retirement account, and every trade. When politicians speak of balancing the budget, they are selling a nostalgic illusion. The goal is not to eliminate the debt. The goal is to keep it sustainable enough that we don't stop believing in the fantasy. Because once that belief fades, the math stops working. If confidence collapses, the economy, built entirely on rolling promises, grinds to a halt. That is the reality of sovereign debt. The plan was never to pay it back. The plan is to ensure we all keep pretending it will be paid. It is a closed loop of trust. However, while we owe it to ourselves, the pain is not shared equally. Interest payments do not flow evenly, they flow upward. They move from the taxes of the working class to the balance sheets of the institutions that own the debt. It is a transfer of wealth from the many to the few, disguised as complex accounting. This is why global inequality and global debt rise in tandem. The system rewards those who own the debt and squeezes those who merely service it. Creditors aren't villains and debtors aren't victims. They are two pistons in the same engine. But we must ask, what happens when the engine runs out of fuel, when new borrowing can no longer cover the old promises? That is when the question, who is the creditor, stops being abstract and starts being personal. At the top of the pyramid, there is no single face to blame. It isn't just Wall Street or China or the IMF. It is the system itself. We have turned debt into money and money into a god. Debt once meant bondage. Today it masquerades as balance. But if that balance ever tips, if the confidence finally breaks, the illusion will vanish, and we will be left remembering what debt really is, a promise that cannot be kept forever.